Hello, it's Xavier from Expressions of Grace Bonsai again. Sun's out today, so that means I can leave the editing and everything that to people who know what they're doing. And wish you all a warm welcome from, it is actually sunny Grantham. The hat isn't just to cover the fact that I am actually losing the hair up top, but also because we have a bad case in Lower Grantham of ninja spiders. Ninja spider, these little monsters. They come leaping out of the eaves of my little shelter here, and normally they wait till I'm doing a little bit of difficult wiring or very, very technical pruning, and they'll give it the old ninja leap and end up in my ear or doing all sorts of nefarious things in what's left of my hair. So the hat's there as much for them, but also for my other favourites, those lovely little birds that you can hear in the background. They like nothing better than dropping the occasional welcome message to me, if only to encourage me to continue with my bonsai and to continue to help them find worms. So that is the secondary reason for the hat, but obviously the primary one, as we all know, is to cover the fact that there ain't a lot going on up there. Well, actually there's not a lot going on anywhere up there, but enough of that. I'm just going to quickly take you to this Yamadori Hornbeam, and just going to remove the remainder of the last year's leaves. Got to be a little bit careful because you can end up pulling off some of the buds if you're not a little bit aware of it. But the main thing today is to get that one repotted. I've got a couple more left here to do, and then I want to have a little bit more fun in the sense that I've got a couple of larches, maples that I'm going to just go through the process of putting into nicer pots. You saw some of these in episode 1, these larches. I've got a number of those, but I've picked out 3 or 4 that definitely are good enough to start their bonsai life in a pot. And again, I've got a wide variety of trees, very diverse. It's a nice word, diverse. So I've got diversity going on in my... I can see you, you bird. Don't you think I can't see you? You go away. You tell your mate sorry. You're going to think I'm an absolute Fruit Loop, aren't you? Well, I probably am, to be perfectly honest. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? I've just been sitting with my mouth agape like this, and I can't for the life of me remember what this very, very common Craggius. Yeah, it's so ridiculously obvious what it is that I'll be putting on the screen somewhere about there. My little ceramic man will probably make some comment about me right about this moment. But there you go. So that one's going to get potted. A couple of little interesting, don't know where it's going to look best, interesting maples. Odd angles I've done with them, so I'm going to pot those. I've got some hornbeam that I've had in little pots, but again, trouble with that, you leave them in these too long and the roots just keep going downwards. So eventually you've actually got to bite the bullet and pull them out. Did a couple of Italian alders the other day, and they're looking really good actually. I've put them into some pots, but I've got one more left to get out of this great horrible thing. You can see there's loads of roots at the bottom. Either that, or yeah, that's roots. I thought it was worms for a minute. I'm fitting well after my morning mile swim. I was practicing because apparently it says if you can learn to hold on to carbon dioxide a bit longer, it helps with your stroke. I'm not sure how. It just sounds like a blowing wind, to be honest. So there was me trying to hold my breath a bit longer, and all I ended up doing was swallowing more water and looking more foolish. But anyway, enough of that. We're going to move to removing the leaves on this, and I always support individual branches and just support even little ones. Just get this. I'm not going to show you me pulling that one out because I've got other videos of stuff like that, so in fact that's pretty well boring enough for now, so we'll leave that for now. It's actually got a lovely shape, this hornbeam, so I just thought I'd give it a quick spin so you can see it. And I'll probably just need to do a bit of wiring on it, but I'm certainly not going to video that. Watching someone make a mess of wiring can be pretty painful, as you well know already from my Dawn Redwood. But yeah, a little spin of that. I might just show you the route in a minute. You all know how to do repots, so you can just watch bits and pieces, but I'm going to talk a little bit about my father, God bless him, and dealing with Alzheimer's, because I ended up becoming his carer. That's the root mass. It came out in a nice solid ball, and I could see there's a lot of healthy white roots there. So I'll give that a good rake out, clean it right out, and and then put it into a bigger brown plastic training pot, which I got from All Things Bonsai. I think it's like 10 for £42, which for a 30cm plastic training pot, £4, great value. It's all coming out really nicely. Say that was 2 years ago when I did my dig for these. So I first found out that my dad had Alzheimer's when I was dealing with when I was dealing with my mum's cancer. But no, it was mum's sickness that meant I had to go down there and spend some time down there, which was massively positive in the end, although it was a sad occasion. It did mean that I got to sort of re-engage with my mother and my father, but I also got to notice that poor old dad, bless him, they had a big greyhound, a rescue greyhound, and it used to absolutely astound me the amount of times he walked it, or tried to feed it, and I didn't really give it a thought. I was so caught up in looking after mum that there was one evening where he took the dog, I think it must have been 6-7 occasions in the space of an hour and a half, and you know, for those of you listening, you may have tonight, you think, well, it's pretty obvious what was going on. But it was during this period that I realised that Dad had Alzheimer's. And it was really disturbing. I'd never actually dealt with anything like it before, and at that stage it was just that he couldn't remember doing, you know, basically like walking the dog or feeding the dog. But it also explained why I used to find so much stuff in the fridge. There'd be these steaks that were going green. I mean, I was so jealous in terms of the amount of stuff he'd been buying for just him and Mum, but it was just going off. Well, yeah, and there were other things I was noticing that realised that he just couldn't care for her and for himself. There was a rat infestation because neither of them were able to keep the kitchen clean. And you know, I felt pretty responsible, but then I lived 350 miles away and had, you know, my own family and worries and responsibilities. But you know, it makes you realise that you've got to keep an eye. You know, I had to keep an eye out on my parents, and I hadn't been, so I'd let them down in that way. But you know, I don't beat myself up about it. I just move forward and say, how can I help? What ended up happening is Mum died from the cancer. And again, I might talk about cancer at another time because my wife also suffered from that. But we're faced with the prospect, speaking of the sister, of what do I do with Dad, because I couldn't leave him on his own. I mean, the last time I went down there, I mean, we're talking back in 2015, he'd picked me up from Plymouth Station in his old car, and driving back he was chatting to me, and I'm not sure he knew who I was actually. But suddenly dawned, he was on the wrong side of the road. I had to pull him over, and he got quite upset about that. And again, when I looked more into Alzheimer's, I realised that, you know, the rational part of him knew there was something wrong, or the cognitive part, but the part the Alzheimer's was affecting, well, it was just his emotions. It sent him into a bit of a spin. There's no way around it when you've got budgets and stuff like that. The soil looks pretty good, you recycle it. This has come out of that pot. All I do is, if I can see some obvious weeds or moss, I'll pull them off. But otherwise, what'll happen, this will go into a pile. It's quite damp at the moment, but I'll dry it off, and then I'll get my sieves and all that sort of stuff. Get what good stuff there is in it, and this is the stuff that I always use for the initial pots on the Yamadori style of the stuff I've dug up from the fields. So yeah, I'm less worried about whether there's bits of weeds in it or stuff. I'm just more interested in the friability and whether it's still in good shape, and it just saves money. So that's what I got from there. That'll allow me to do a repot of another freshly dug one in November later this year. So anyway, very exciting, I know, but I thought I'd show you what I do with my soil. Basically, we've got, again, really nice selection of roots all the way around. Interesting base. I'll clean it up a bit, and then it'll go into a plastic training pot, and I'll leave it for a couple of years. Quite compact. There's loads of roots in there, so that should go in nicely. I'm not overly worried about the front, to be honest. I just want to have a reasonable securing point. There's actually quite a strong root that comes backwards that I may remove in a couple of years' time. But that's a good anchor point for it right now. Getting back to my father, as I say, initially it was just things like shopping, forgetting he'd taken the dog out, forgetting the way home, and you know, for 90% of the time he was okay, he was able to do stuff. So I still had quite a lot of work related and other issues going on, so at the time my sister, bless her, took on the responsibility of taking care of Dad for 18 months, 2 years. And she's got a couple of boys, but she's quite busy within the medical world. She started telling me bits and pieces, and it was all sort of very funny about things he'd forget, or sometimes mood swings was a problem. But it eventually became clear that she just wasn't able to look after him. So, you know, we realised he was going to end up with me anyway. I certainly wasn't going to put him in a home. It's not the way I think. I spoke to my wife and we took the decision that we'll take Dad full time, and that I would basically take a sort of semi-retirement. I was fortunate that I was able to do that, and that sort of coincided with the time when I started making serious decisions about trying to do something more with the bonsais. Glad I had, because trying to deal with Dad, his dementia, and also my sick wife, it's hard work. It was really hard work, emotionally draining, and if I hadn't had the trees to help me, I don't know where I'd have been. But anyway, so there it is. I want the roots to regrow and establish themselves, and for this repot to go successfully. It's been in my nursery beds for about 5 years. It's from a 50-pound whip. So each year I have slowly selected branches that I want. We're at the point where Dad has joined us and is living with us in the converted garage. And at the stage that he joins us, he's not yet willing to accept that he has anything more than an occasional memory issue related to getting old. Okay, welcome back. Just pulled it out of its plastic pot. There we go, we've got a few. There's upwards one there, upward there. I'm still, to this day, it amazes me just how few roots you actually need to have. Yeah, oh, that's twisting back on itself. What I might do is, if I put a rock in there, then I can change the angle of it. Yeah, so with my dad, he settled in okay, but he kept forgetting that Mum had died. And his Alzheimer's deteriorated really, really quickly, to be honest. From, as my sister says, it's my fault, to be honest. But from the point where he came to stay with me, it got worse really quickly. And you know, within 6 months, he'd gone from being able to do his modelling. He used to build 3-foot wooden scale warships. He was doing the Bismarck, and although he didn't follow the instructions because he'd reached a point where he couldn't understand them, his knowledge of it from his younger days was still good enough that he could hash something together. Okay, so the pot I've selected, it's really burnished. Looking at how that's going to attach, probably want it that way so I can take it. There's a fairly strong base there that I can use to tie down to. Yeah, I think the thing I noticed with my dad though is his temper started going. He stopped being able to do his model, which was a real problem because it sounds horrible, it meant that he was in the house a lot more rather than in his flat. And he was so confused about who everyone was that you could see he didn't know why he was where he was or anything like that. And I kept having to re-explain to him who I was. And you could see in his eyes he didn't believe me. And then when he'd go off on walks, he'd get lost. So I started having to follow him at a discreet distance, but it quickly became a full-time carer's job. And I sort of got in contact with the Alzheimer's Society, and you know, learnt all the right things and read some good books. And one of the biggest things I learned was that no matter how hard and how frustrating it is, whatever it is, you know, your loved one is thinking or believes, it's not that you play into the fantasy, but they're happy. Their condition is not going to improve, and by telling them they're wrong or telling them they're forgetting things, you just cause that frustration that just makes the situation worse. So though I may get really frustrated having to continually tell him the same thing again and again and again, or having him not believe, I mean, he went through a stage where he kept wanting to go back home, which was to Plymouth, because he didn't believe that he lived with me. When you go for a walk, you tell people I was some evil person who had him locked in this house. The real time it got difficult was one of Nigel's weeds there. I think that's a Scottish whatever weed. Anyway, I don't want that in there. When he kept wandering off and getting lost. When I had a taxi driver bring him back one time. Yeah, he still had his greyhound, Mr Waggins. And I think Mr Waggins kept him safer than he did himself, because I mean, he had absolutely no road sense, Dad. Harlexton Road can be a bit of a nightmare, to be honest. But anyway, so we'd have people bringing him back, and him saying he lived with some evil family who did all sorts of things, that he lived in Plymouth and all he wanted to do was get back to his wife. And it was quite heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking when someone doesn't remember you. Well, that was a bit of a disaster. We're now looking at it in a bigger plastic container, which had holes, enough holes that I could do actually a diagonal. And that was the problem I had with the ceramic that I'd picked out. The holes necessary to do the tie downs was certainly not where I needed them. It's developed such a lovely structure. What it now needs to do is spend a couple of years in another training pot, so that this can get filled up with lovely white larch roots. And we all know, if we've dealt with larches, Japanese larch, they throw out copious amounts of roots very quickly. So all I'll be doing now is going around and looking at individual buds. They've got a lovely swell on them, so I'm looking at just straightforward pairs. So at this stage, looking at where the tree is, I'll take that one off, so I'll get 2 and 2. This is going to go upwards. I will probably wire that down. So I've got one bud there, second bud there, so I'm going to take off the end one there. On this side, I can wire the branch further round if I want. Take ugly stubs off. Yeah, so I've got this point where my dad's getting lost and being brought back by people all the time, and I just didn't know what to do. So I spoke to the Alzheimer support group, and they told me about trackers. And I must be honest, it sounded a bit wrong, finding a tracker for my father, but it made such a difference knowing that I didn't have to worry, because he used to disappear for hours at a time, and then he'd suddenly come back so tired. I mean, he was 80, and I have no idea where he was. So anyway, so I've got the tracker, set it up, and it was absolutely brilliant. Did exactly what it was supposed to do. I was then able to keep an eye on him, regular sort of couple of minute updates if I wanted to, and when I get to about 30 minutes, if he was too far away or he was heading towards big roads, or what he likes to do is try and head into town, which is guaranteed for him to get lost, I would be able to get in the car and pop out and casually find him before he'd got himself into any sort of trouble. And normally I would just pull up with the van beside him, and he'd go, "Oh, what are you doing here then?" Or he'd say, "Oh, you look like my son," which was always quite amusing. Yeah, and then he'd get in the car with me and he'd tell me about this horrible person he lives with again, not realising that I'm obviously the horrible person. And then he would get into a fuss as he saw the driveway, because he always recognised the driveway. But I could normally reassure him a little bit. But what did happen is the Alzheimer's got worse. That got worse. and by then I was also dealing with my wife's cancer, and I just didn't have the time to devote to him properly. He was trying to kick through the gates, trying to get out. When he did get out, he'd get into my car or find my keys. He was very good at finding stuff for someone who had a bad memory. I was like, yeah, so he could find things. I mean, I remember when he used to like a tipple, and we lost the drinks cabinet key, and it was only after he died that I found it hidden in his bedroom. I had to deal with that continued deterioration, and again, that was where I learnt about how to deal with frustration, how to deal with anger, how to deal with things that you've absolutely got no control over, and how to trust. I mean, granted, as I've said already, I have a strong faith, but you know what, when you're tired and frustrated and being called all sorts of things by your father, that's pretty wearing. Yeah, so I'm just going to go around this, continue to trim it all up, back to 2 buds. I always find the trouble with these is that actually is not being ruthless enough. So you think, oh, I want to keep a bit of length in it, and you end up creating hassles for yourself in the following year because you've only got to go back and cut back, and it just wastes growing time. Yeah, so anyway, so the tracker made a massive difference until he worked out what it was. And he didn't get it, but he knew that I kept wanting to put this car key fob on him. And again, he became pretty belligerent. Anything I wanted him to do, he would do the opposite. So it got to the point where I had to hide it, and he ended up hiding it from me. So when it got to the point where I can no longer rely on him having the tracker, that was the first time that he got to see the holiday home in France, which is what, and we discovered it because when my wife died, we had to, for the funeral arrangements, I couldn't have Dad all around there. So he went and stayed at a respite care centre for a little while, a day. When I saw him later, he said, oh, he's been to France and he met lots of people in France. He says, but I wouldn't want to go back there. The help from Alzheimer's support said there's a point you reach when, if you can't guarantee you can keep someone safe, no matter how much you love them or feel you have responsibility, then your greater responsibility is to their well-being. And I could no longer keep safe, so I was at that point of finding him a care home, and then we had all the COVID palaver, and he got a completely unrelated infection, and sadly died from that. But yeah, it was, must be honest, dealing with Alzheimer's was absolutely horrendous. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but it seems to be more prevalent these days. And if you've got any questions or anything and you're actually taking the time to watch this, or there's anything that sort of rings true to you, or you've got a message or anything, I'll have a go at answering it. I mean, as I say, I ended up carrying him for nearly 3 years. Photos wasn't a good thing. One of the books suggested take him through photos and keep reminding him, but he was forgetting too quickly, and I found that very quickly he was hiding the photo album because he knew there was a problem. It's like the picture of his wife. He took it out of the frame and either hid it, I didn't find it ever again, and speaking to someone, I think it was a case of the frustration was so bad that although he knew this person meant something, because emotionally he could feel an emotional tie, but he couldn't put a finger to it. And having his family telling him, oh, that's your wife, why do you keep hiding the photo? I think in the end he dealt with it any way he could, which was to literally get rid of it. So I found with Dad that photos actually very quickly became a source of anxiety, frustration and anger. I got to the point in the end where I just did everything I could not to argue with him. I kept everything locked up and safe as I could. And, you know, whether it's Providence or not, you know, the time came when I would have been putting him to a care home, and he became sick instead, and bless him, died in hospital. But yeah, Alzheimer's is tough. But when you're dealing with Alzheimer's and with a wife who's got terminal cancer, I actually did get through it all right. But anyway, enough of that. This one's done. I'm going to do some more trees, and I'll show you the end products of them.
And here we go now. It's not perfect, but I think he's going to go for it. I think we're going to go for it. There she goes. Oh, there he goes. 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 Yeah! It's a goner. Have you got any words of wisdom about your flight? Yes, it definitely, well, it flew. We know it flew.